The sound of her mother's heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the house like a countdown timer. Elena Martinez knew that sound meant business, real business. The kind that would change her life whether she wanted it to or not. She sat at the long dining table where her family had shared thousands of meals over the years. The same table where she had done homework as a child, celebrated birthdays, and argued about her decision to study architecture instead of business. Today, it felt more like a courtroom than a dining room. Her father cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. He always did that when he was nervous or about to say something important. Elena had learned to read these little signs over her 28 years of life. Her mother sat perfectly straight, hands folded, wearing the expression she reserved for serious family discussions. "Elena, we need to talk about your future," her father began, his voice carrying the weight of generations of tradition. Elena's stomach dropped. She had been dreading this conversation for months. Ever since the Castellanos family had started showing up at more family gatherings, ever since Ricardo Castellanos had begun paying her special attention at church functions, ever since the whispered conversations between her parents had grown more frequent. "The Castellanos family has made a formal proposal," her mother said, getting straight to the point as she always did. "They want to unite our families through marriage." "You and Ricardo?" The words hit Elena like cold water. Even though she had seen this coming, hearing it out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. She looked around the dining room at the family photos covering the walls, generations of Martinez women who had followed this same path, grandmothers and great-grandmothers who had married for family, for business, for everything except love. "This is 2024, Elena said quietly, surprised by how calm her voice sounded when her heart was racing. "People don't arrange marriages anymore." Her father leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. "Our families have been friends for 3 generations. The Castellanos import business would perfectly complement our export operations. Together, we could control the entire supply chain from South America to North America." Elena understood the business logic. She had grown up hearing about profit margins and market share at the dinner table. Her parents had built their company from nothing, working 18-hour days to give their children opportunities they never had. The guilt of disappointing them was almost overwhelming. "But what about what I want?" Elena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "What you want and what's best for you aren't always the same thing, Mia. Ricardo is a good man from a good family. He's successful, educated, and he cares about you." Elena thought about Ricardo. He was all those things her mother said. Handsome, polite, successful, and running his family's business. But when she talked to him, she felt like she was having a conversation through glass. There was no spark, no connection, no moment where she forgot about everything else and just enjoyed being with him. "I have my own career," Elena said, trying a different approach. "My architectural firm is just getting started. I have clients, projects in development. I can't just abandon everything." Her father's expression softened slightly. "No one is asking you to abandon your career. Ricardo understands that modern women work. The Castellanos family respects your profession," but Elena knew what that meant. Her career would become a hobby, something she did in her spare time while her real job became being Mrs. Ricardo Castellanos. She would design houses for friends and family, maybe do some small commercial projects, but never the innovative, sustainable housing developments she dreamed about. "When?" Elena asked, because she knew there was no point in arguing further tonight. Her parents had made up their minds, and 3 generations of tradition stood behind their decision. "We were thinking next spring," her mother said already. "Planning, that gives us time to plan a proper wedding. Something beautiful that honors both families." Elena nodded, feeling numb. Spring was only 6 months away. 6 months to say goodbye to the life she had planned. The dreams she had nurtured, the independence she had fought so hard to achieve. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment looking at the architectural plans spread across her coffee table. She had been working on a design for affordable housing that incorporated sustainable materials and energy-efficient systems. It was the kind of project that could make a real difference in people's lives. The kind of work that made her excited to get up every morning. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Carmen. "How did the family dinner go?" Elena stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "They want me to marry Ricardo Castellanos in the spring." Her phone rang immediately. Carmen didn't waste time with small talk. "Are you serious? Please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was," Elena said, sinking deeper into her couch. "It's all arranged. The families have already agreed on everything." "But this is crazy. You barely know him, and you don't love him." Elena closed her eyes. "Love isn't the point, according to my parents. Security is the point. Family honor is the point. Building something bigger than just yourself is the point. And what do you think?" That was the question that kept Elena awake that night. What did she think? Part of her understood her parents' reasoning. They had sacrificed everything to build their business, to give their children opportunities. They saw this marriage as the ultimate success, the final step in establishing their family's place in society. But another part of her, the part that had stayed up late as a child drawing house plans by flashlight under her covers, the part that had fought to study architecture instead of business, the part that lit up when she talked about sustainable design and affordable housing, that part was screaming in protest. She thought about her grandmother, who had married at 19 to a man she had met only 3 times before their wedding. Abuela had always insisted she had been happy that love came after marriage, that duty and respect were more important than passion. But Elena remembered the wistful look in her grandmother's eyes sometimes when she watched romantic movies. The way she would pause when love songs played on the radio. Elena fell asleep that night with architectural plans still spread around her, dreaming of buildings she might never get to design and a life she might never get to live. She didn't know that in 3 days everything would change. She didn't know that a chance encounter in a coffee shop would offer her a choice she never thought possible. She didn't know that someone would soon tell her she deserved a better offer than the one life had presented her. All she knew was that the sound of her mother's heels on marble had started a countdown, and she had 6 months to figure out how to live with a decision that felt like losing herself. 3 days had passed since the family dinner that changed everything. 3 days of Elena walking around her apartment like a caged bird, looking at her architectural plans and wondering if she would ever get to use them. 3 days of phone calls from her mother about wedding venues and guest lists, as if Elena had already said yes with enthusiasm instead of silent resignation. On Thursday morning, Elena couldn't take the suffocating feeling in her chest anymore. She grabbed her laptop bag, stuffed it with the sustainable housing plans she had been working on, and headed to Café Luna, the small coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment that had become her thinking place over the past 2 years. The owner, Mrs. Chun, knew Elena's usual order by heart: large coffee with oat milk and a blueberry muffin. Elena found her favorite corner table by the window, spread out her papers, and tried to lose herself in the work that still made her heart race with excitement. Even when everything else in her life felt predetermined, she was deep in calculations for solar panel placement when her phone rang. Her mother's contact photo appeared on the screen, and Elena's stomach immediately tensed. She let it go to voicemail, but it rang again 30 seconds later. Then again, finally, Elena answered. "Hi, Mom." "Elena, I've been trying to reach you. Mrs. Castellanos wants to meet for lunch tomorrow to discuss the engagement party. She has some beautiful ideas about—" "Mom, can we please not do this right now?" Elena interrupted, louder than she intended. Several people in the coffee shop looked her way. "I need some time to think." "There's nothing to think about, Mia. Everything is arranged. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." Elena ended the call and immediately felt guilty about hanging up on her mother. But the walls of the coffee shop felt like they were closing in. She needed air, needed space, needed to be anywhere but sitting still while other people planned her life. She gathered her papers quickly, maybe too quickly. Her laptop bag caught the edge of her coffee cup, sending the half-full mug flying across the table. Coffee splashed everywhere, soaking her architectural plans and dripping onto the floor. No, no, no. Elena scrambled to save her designs, but the coffee had already seeped through the papers. Months of work, ruined in seconds, she was on her hands and knees, trying to salvage what she could, when a pair of expensive leather shoes appeared in her field of vision. She looked up to see a man around her age crouching down to help gather the coffee-soaked papers. "I'm so sorry," Elena said, feeling tears threaten. "I'm such a mess today." "Don't apologize," the man said, his voice calm and warm. "Accidents happen. Though I have to say, these designs are impressive even with coffee stains." Elena looked at him properly for the first time. He had dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it, intelligent brown eyes behind stylish glasses, and the kind of confident presence that suggested he was used to solving problems. He was wearing a well-fitted navy suit but had loosened his tie, giving him a relaxed elegance that felt approachable rather than intimidating. "You can actually read architectural plans?" Elena asked, surprised. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I invest in real estate development. I've learned to recognize good design when I see it. And these," he held up one of the less damaged pages, "are really good. Sustainable housing with integrated community spaces? That's innovative thinking." Elena felt a flutter of pride despite the disaster of spilled coffee. It had been a long time since someone outside her field had looked at her work and immediately understood what she was trying to achieve. "I'm Adrian," he said, extending his hand. "Elena." His handshake was firm, confident, the kind that suggested he was someone who followed through on his commitments. "Let me buy you another coffee," Adrian said. "And maybe you can tell me more about these designs while we wait for them to dry out." Elena hesitated. She didn't make a habit of talking to strangers in coffee shops, especially when she was feeling emotional and vulnerable. But something about Adrian felt safe, and she desperately needed to talk to someone who wasn't family, wasn't part of the complicated web of expectations and traditions that was suffocating her. "Okay," she said. "But I should warn you, I'm not very good company today." "Lucky for you, I'm excellent company most days, so maybe we'll balance each other out." They found a clean table, and Adrian returned with 2 fresh coffees and a stack of napkins. Elena carefully laid out her plans, trying to assess the damage. Some were salvageable, others would need to be reprinted, but the main design was intact. "So, tell me about this project," Adrian said. Leaning forward with genuine interest, Elena found herself explaining her vision for affordable housing that didn't look or feel like affordable housing. She talked about using sustainable materials, incorporating green spaces, designing community areas that would encourage neighbors to actually know each other. As she spoke, she watched Adrian's expression, expecting him to get bored or start checking his phone like most people did when she got passionate about her work. Instead, he asked questions. Smart questions that showed he understood not just the design aspects but the social and economic implications of what she was proposing. "The financing model is the biggest challenge," Elena admitted. "Most developers want maximum units with minimum investment in community features. They don't see the long-term value in building places where people actually want to live instead of just places where they can afford to live. What if you found a developer who understood that long-term value?" Adrian asked. Elena laughed, but it came out more bitter than she intended. "That would require a miracle, and I'm fresh out of those." Adrian tilted his head, studying her with those intelligent eyes. "You sound like someone who's dealing with more than just coffee-stained architectural plans." Elena felt her defenses rising. She didn't know this man, didn't owe him her life story. But there was something about the way he listened, the way he seemed to actually see her, that made the words come tumbling out before she could stop them. "My family has arranged for me to get married," she said quietly. "To someone I barely know, someone I don't love. They think it's the best thing for everyone involved." Adrian's expression grew serious. "And what do you think?" "I think I'm about to lose everything I've worked for. My career, my independence, my dreams. All for the sake of family tradition and business deals." They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop fading into background. Elena couldn't believe she had just told a complete stranger the thing she hadn't even been able to say out loud to her best friend. I'm sorry, she said, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. You didn't ask for my life story. You were just being nice about the coffee spill. Elena, Adrian said, and the way he said her name made her look up at him. I wasn't just being nice. I meant what I said about your designs. They're exceptional. And from what you've told me about your vision, you're exactly the kind of architect I've been looking for. Elena felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in days. Hope, maybe. Or just the simple pleasure of being seen for who she really was instead of who everyone expected her to be. What do you mean? She asked. Adrian checked his watch and seemed to make a decision. Do you have plans for dinner? Because I think we should continue this conversation somewhere we can spread out these plans properly. I have a proposition that might interest you. Elena looked at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, who understood her work, who listened when she talked about her dreams. 3 days ago, her future had been decided for her. Now, sitting across from Adrian in a coffee shop that smelled like possibilities, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there might be another option. I'd like that, she said, and meant it. The restaurant Adrian chose was nothing like Elena expected. Instead of the stuffy, expensive places where her family conducted business dinners, he took her to a small Italian place with mismatched chairs and wine bottles turned into candle holders, the kind of place where people came to actually talk, not to impress each other. Elena had gone home to change after their coffee shop encounter, trading her coffee-stained clothes for a simple blue dress that made her feel confident. Without trying too hard, she arrived at the restaurant carrying her architectural plans in a proper portfolio case, determined to present herself as the professional she was, not the confused woman who had spilled coffee all over herself that morning. Adrian was already there, sitting at a corner table with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He had changed too, swapping his business suit for dark jeans and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, approachable, and when he smiled at her across the restaurant, Elena felt that flutter in her chest again. I ordered wine, he said as she sat down. I hope that's okay. I figured we both could use some after the day we've had. Elena accepted the glass gratefully. She wasn't much of a drinker, but something about this whole situation called for liquid courage. Thank you for this. For listening today, for helping with the coffee disaster, for treating my work seriously. Elena, Adrian said, leaning forward slightly, I want you to know that my interest in your designs isn't charity or politeness. I've been developing properties for 8 years, and I can count on one hand the number of architects who understand both innovative design and practical implementation the way you do. Elena felt a warm glow that had nothing to do with the wine. Most people think sustainable design is either too expensive or too complicated. Most people are thinking short-term, Adrian replied. They see the upfront costs without considering the long-term savings, the community benefits, the environmental impact, but you've thought through all of that. Their conversation flowed as easily as it had in the coffee shop. Adrian told her about some of his previous projects, the challenges of finding architects who shared his vision for development that actually improved communities instead of just extracting profit from them. Elena found herself talking about her college thesis, her internship disasters, the small victories that had kept her going when everyone told her that sustainable design was just a trend. What made you want to be an architect? Adrian asked as they shared a plate of pasta that was somehow both simple and perfect. Elena considered the question. When I was 12, my family drove through a neighborhood that had been destroyed by a hurricane. All these houses were gone, families had lost everything. But there was one house still standing, barely damaged. I asked my dad why that one survived, when all the others didn't, and he said it was just luck, but I couldn't accept that. I spent weeks at the library researching hurricane-resistant construction, reading about building codes and foundation design. I realized that the house survived because someone had built it better, had thought about what might happen and planned for it. Adrian nodded, understanding immediately. You wanted to be the person who builds things that last. Exactly. But not just that last physically. I want to design places where people can build lives, where communities can grow, where families can thrive for generations. And your family doesn't understand that? Elena's expression grew clouded. She had been having such a good time that she had almost forgotten about the arranged marriage, about the decision that was supposedly already made for her. My family thinks success means security and status. They've worked incredibly hard to build their business, to give me opportunities they never had. In their minds, marrying Ricardo Castellanos is the ultimate achievement. But what do you think? Elena set down her wine glass and looked directly at Adrian. I think I'm about to disappoint the people I love most in the world. But I also think that if I go through with this marriage, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I could have accomplished if I had been brave enough to choose my own path. Adrian was quiet for a moment, and Elena worried she had shared too much again. But when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, not judgmental. Tell me about Ricardo. What's he like? Elena sighed. He's ... He's handsome, successful, comes from a good family. He's never been unkind to me. But when I'm with him, I feel like I'm acting in a play where I don't know my lines. We don't talk about anything meaningful. He doesn't ask about my work, doesn't seem curious about what makes me excited or passionate. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between them. Elena had been avoiding asking herself that very question for weeks. No, she said quietly. I don't love him. And I don't think he loves me either. We're just two people who happen to fit well into our family's business plans. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her with those intelligent eyes. Elena, can I ask you something? Of course. If the family pressure and business arrangements didn't exist, if you could design your life exactly the way you wanted it, what would that look like? Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever asked her that question before. I would have my own firm. Not just residential projects, but large-scale sustainable developments. I would work with communities to understand what they actually need, not what developers think they should want. I would prove that good design doesn't have to be expensive, that beautiful buildings can also be affordable and environmentally responsible. And personally? Personally, Elena said, feeling brave from the wine and the warmth in Adrian's eyes. I would want to be with someone who sees me as a partner, not as an accessory to their life. Someone who gets excited when I get excited about a project, who challenges me to be better, who builds something with me instead of expecting me to fit into something they've already built. Adrian nodded slowly. That sounds like a beautiful life. It does, Elena agreed sadly. But it's not the life that's been arranged for me. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. When he looked up at her, his expression was intense, determined. Elena, what if I told you that the life you just described doesn't have to be just a dream? What do you mean? I mean, what if there was another option? What if someone offered you the chance to build exactly the kind of career you want, to work on projects that matter to you, to prove that your vision can be both profitable and transformative? Elena felt her heart start to race. Adrian, what are you saying? He reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm, grounding, real. I'm saying that when you told me this afternoon that it's already arranged, I started thinking about how to give you a better offer. Elena stared at him, not daring to believe what she thought he might be suggesting. What kind of better offer? Adrian smiled, and Elena realized that this moment, sitting in the little Italian restaurant with an almost stranger who understood her dreams better than people she had known her whole life, was about to change everything. The kind that would give you everything you just described, he said. Your own firm, projects that matter, the chance to prove that sustainable design can change communities. Complete creative control, significant financial backing, and the freedom to build the career you've always wanted. Elena felt like the world had tilted sideways. Are you serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Adrian said. But I should warn you, it would mean taking a risk. It would mean disappointing your family, at least initially. It would mean choosing the unknown over the safe choice. Elena looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Adrian's face. 3 days ago, she had thought her future was decided. Now, sitting across from this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer, she hadn't even known she was praying. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to either fall or learn to fly. "Tell me more," she said, and felt her whole life pivot on those 3 words. Elena spent the entire next day pacing around her apartment. Adrian's contract spread across her kitchen table like a map to a foreign country. Every time she read through the terms, her heart raced with excitement. Every time she thought about telling her parents, her stomach dropped with dread. She called in sick to work, something she had never done unless she was actually ill. But she couldn't concentrate on regular projects when her entire future hung in the balance. Instead, she found herself sketching preliminary ideas for the Seattle development, her imagination running wild with possibilities for community spaces and sustainable design features. By afternoon, she knew she needed to talk to someone who wasn't emotionally invested in her decision. Carmen would tell her to follow her dreams. Her parents would tell her to honor her commitments. She needed perspective from someone who understood the complexities of family expectations and business arrangements. That's when she decided to call Ricardo. They had exchanged phone numbers months ago when their families had started pushing them together, but they had never had a real conversation. Their interactions had always been polite and surface level, supervised by parents or embedded in group social situations. "Elena?" Ricardo sounded surprised when he answered. "Is everything okay?" "I was hoping we could talk," Elena said, feeling nervous. "Just the 2 of us, without our families around. Would you have time for coffee this afternoon?" There was a pause. Of course, is something wrong? Not wrong, exactly. Just ... complicated. They met at a neutral coffee shop downtown, far from either of their neighborhoods where they might run into family friends. Ricardo arrived first, and Elena was struck by how different he looked when he wasn't performing the role of dutiful son. He seemed younger somehow, less formal, wearing jeans and a casual shirt instead of the business attire she usually saw him in. "Thank you for meeting me," Elena said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Elena, you sounded upset on the phone. What's going on?" Elena took a deep breath, deciding to jump straight into the difficult conversation. "Ricardo, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay," he said, looking wary. "Do you want to marry me?" Ricardo's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "What kind of question is that? An honest one. Not because our families think it's a good idea, not because it makes business sense, but because you actually want to spend your life with me." Ricardo set down his cup and was quiet for a long moment. Elena watched emotions play across his face, surprise, discomfort, and then something that looked like relief. "Can I ask why you're asking?" "Because I've been thinking about what marriage should be," Elena said carefully. "And I realize that you and I have never talked about what we want from life. What makes us happy, what we dream about when no one else is listening." "Our families have been friends forever," Ricardo said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We know each other, do we?" Elena challenged gently. "What's my favorite color? What do I do when I'm stressed? What kind of music do I listen to when I'm working?" Ricardo opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We've never really talked about those things." "Exactly. And I couldn't answer those questions about you either." Ricardo leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "Elena, where is this coming from? Did someone say something to you?" Elena decided to take a risk. "I met someone." "Not romantically?" she added quickly, seeing Ricardo's expression change. "A business contact who offered me an incredible opportunity, but taking it would mean breaking our engagement." "What kind of opportunity?" Elena found herself describing. Adrian's offer, the Seattle project, the chance to build her own firm. As she talked, she watched Ricardo's face, expecting to see disappointment or anger. Instead, she saw something unexpected, understanding. "That sounds amazing," Ricardo said quietly. "You think so?" "Elena, I've heard you talk about your work at family gatherings. Your whole face lights up when you discuss sustainable design. I've never seen you look that excited about anything related to our engagement." Elena felt a stab of guilt. Ricardo, I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt your feelings, Ricardo laughed, but it wasn't bitter. You want to know something? You're not hurting my feelings. You're actually giving me hope that maybe I'm not the only one who's been feeling trapped by all of this. Elena stared at him. What do you mean? Ricardo glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward. Can I trust you with something? Of course. There's someone else. Someone I've been in love with for 3 years, but I've never been able to tell my family about her. Elena felt her jaw drop. Who? Her name is Isabel. She's a teacher at the elementary school near our warehouse. I met her when I was doing a community outreach program, and we just connected, but my family would never approve. Why not? Ricardo's expression grew pained. She's not from our social circle. Her family doesn't have money or business connections. My parents have made it clear that they expect me to marry someone who can contribute to the family's social and financial status. Elena felt a wave of sympathy for Ricardo that surprised her. She had been so focused on her own trapped feelings that she hadn't considered that he might be in the same situation. Do you love her? Completely, Ricardo said without hesitation. We've been dating in secret for 2 years. She knows about the arranged engagement, and she's been incredibly patient, but I can see that it's wearing on her. She deserves better than being someone's secret. Why haven't you told your family? The same reason you haven't told yours about this job opportunity, I imagine. Because disappointing our families feels like betraying everything they've worked for. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who had been cast as the perfect couple but had never been allowed to be real with each other. What are we going to do? Elena asked. I don't know, Ricardo admitted. But Elena, if you have a chance to pursue your dreams, to build the career you want, I think you should take it. Even if it means breaking our engagement? Especially. If it means breaking our engagement, Ricardo smiled sadly. We both deserve to be with people who choose us, not people who are assigned to us. Elena felt tears building. I'm scared, Ricardo. What if my family never forgives me? What if they do? Ricardo countered. What if they realize that your happiness is more important than their business plans? And what about Isabel? What will you do? Ricardo's expression grew determined. I think it's time I stopped being a coward. If you can be brave enough to choose your own path, maybe I can be brave enough to choose mine. Elena reached across the table and took Ricardo's hand. I'm sorry we couldn't have been right for each other. In another world, maybe things would have been different. In another world, maybe we would have been allowed to get to know each other before someone decided we should spend our lives together, Ricardo agreed. But in this world, I think we both deserve better than settling for what's convenient. They finished their coffee talking about their real lives, their actual dreams, the people they were when they weren't performing their roles as the perfect arranged couple. Elena learned that Ricardo loved photography, that he volunteered at animal shelters, that he had always wanted to travel to Japan. Ricardo learned that Elena designed tiny houses for homeless veterans in her spare time, that she was afraid of heights but loved roller coasters, that she had once considered becoming a teacher like Isabel. When they parted ways, Elena felt lighter than she had in months. Not just because she had permission from Ricardo to break their engagement, but because she had finally had an honest conversation with the man her family expected her to marry. In the space of one afternoon, they had become friends in a way that months of supervised courtship had never achieved. That evening, Elena called Adrian. I've been thinking about your offer, she said without preamble. And I have some questions about the timeline and the team structure, and I'd like to propose a few modifications to the contract terms. There was a pause, then Adrian's warm laugh. Does this mean what I think it means? Elena looked around her small apartment, at the architectural plans covering every surface, at the life she had built for herself despite everyone's expectations. It means I'm ready to negotiate. I'll clear my schedule for tomorrow, Adrian said immediately. We can discuss everything in detail. Adrian? Yes? Thank you for seeing something in me that I wasn't sure I saw in myself. Elena, I didn't see anything that wasn't already there. I just offered you the chance to show the world what you're capable of. After they hung up, Elena stood in her apartment feeling like she was on the edge of jumping off a cliff. But for the first time, instead of being terrified of the fall, she was excited about learning to fly. Elena spent 3 days preparing for the conversation that would either free her or destroy her relationship with her family forever. She printed out Adrian's contract, created a detailed presentation about the Seattle project, and practiced, explaining her decision in front of her bathroom mirror until she could deliver it. Without her voice shaking, she also spent those 3 days barely sleeping, imagining her father's disappointed face and her mother's tears when she told them she was choosing a stranger's business offer over their carefully planned arrangement on Sunday evening. Elena asked her parents to meet her at their house for dinner. She cooked their favorite meal, hoping that the familiar comfort food might soften the blow of what she was about to tell them. As she set the table in the same dining room where they had announced her arranged engagement just 2 weeks ago, Elena felt like she was preparing for her own trial. Her parents arrived looking pleased and relaxed. Her mother carried fabric samples and wedding magazines, apparently ready to continue planning the celebration Elena had never agreed to want. "I brought some beautiful options for your dress," her mother said, spreading magazines across the coffee table. "And Mrs. Chun's daughter used the most wonderful caterer for her wedding last spring." Elena's stomach twisted with guilt. "Mom, Dad, before we talk about wedding plans, I need to discuss something important with you." Her father looked up from his newspaper, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What's wrong, Mia?" Elena took a deep breath and launched into the speech she had rehearsed. She told him about meeting Adrian, about his offer, about the opportunity to build her own firm and work on projects that could transform communities. She tried to present it as a business decision, emphasizing the financial benefits and career advancement. Her parents listened in complete silence until she finished, then her father exploded. "Absolutely not," he said, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "Elena, this is insane. You're going to throw away your engagement, abandon your family, and move across the country for some man you met in a coffee shop?" "It's not about Adrian personally," Elena protested. "It's about the career opportunity. It's about betraying your family," her father shot back. "Do you have any idea what this will do to our relationship with the Castellanos family? What it will do to our reputation in the community?" Elena's mother sat frozen, staring at the wedding magazines as if they might disappear if she looked away. "Elena, what about Ricardo? He's a good man. His family has been so kind to us. Ricardo understands," Elena said quietly. "I talked to him. He supports my decision." "You talked to Ricardo about this before you talked to us?" Her father's voice rose another octave. "Elena, this is unacceptable. You're making decisions that affect the entire family without consulting anyone. The same way you made the decision to arrange my engagement without consulting me?" "Elena," replied her own voice getting stronger. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's mother finally looked up from the magazines, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We did what we thought was best for you," her mother said softly. "Marriage to Ricardo would give you security, status, a good life." "But not the life I want," Elena said, sitting down across from her mother. "Mom, I understand that you and Dad have worked incredibly hard to build our family's position in the community. I respect that sacrifice, but I can't sacrifice my own dreams to maintain something I never asked for." Her father began pacing, a habit Elena remembered from her childhood when he was stressed about business problems. "Elena, you don't understand the bigger picture. Our families have been planning this alliance for years. The business opportunities, the social connections, the stability it would provide for future generations. What if I could provide that stability in a different way?" Elena asked, pulling out Adrian's contract. "Dad, look at these numbers. This 5-year contract would generate more income than anything our family has ever been involved with." Her father reluctantly took the contract, his businessman's instincts overriding his emotional reaction. Elena watched his expression change as he read through the financial terms, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. "These numbers seem too good to be true," he said finally. "What's the catch?" The catch is that I have to be willing to take a risk, Elena said. I have to trust in my own abilities instead of relying on family connections. Her mother leaned over to look at the contract. Elena, we don't know anything about this man. How do we know he's legitimate? How do we know he won't take advantage of you? Elena had expected this question. She pulled out her laptop and showed them Adrian's company website, news articles about his previous developments, testimonials from other architects he had worked with. I did my research, Mom. Adrian has an excellent reputation in the industry. Her father studied the information, his expression gradually shifting from anger to reluctant interest. His previous projects do look impressive, he admitted grudgingly. And look at this, Elena said, clicking to another page. This article is from Architecture Today magazine. It calls him one of the most innovative developers in sustainable housing. Her mother was still holding the wedding magazines, as if they were a life preserver in rough seas. But Elena, even if this opportunity is real, why can't you do both? Marry Ricardo and work on this project? Because Ricardo deserves better than a wife who's settling for him, Elena said gently. And because this project requires me to move to Seattle for 2 years. I can't build a marriage and launch a career 3,000 miles apart. Her father stopped pacing and sat down heavily. For the first time since Elena had started talking, he looked tired instead of angry. Elena, I'm scared for you. The world is unpredictable. Business deals fall through. People disappoint you. Marriage to Ricardo would give you security that no career can guarantee. Elena felt her heart break a little at the vulnerability in her father's voice. Dad, I know you're trying to protect me, but the kind of security you're offering comes at the cost of everything that makes me who I am. And what if you fail? Her mother asked, tears finally spilling over. What if this project doesn't work out? What if this man changes his mind? Then I'll figure out what comes next, Elena said. But Mom, what if I succeed? What if I build something amazing that makes you proud? What if I prove that the dreams you helped shape in me were worth pursuing? Her parents exchanged a long look, the kind of wordless communication that came from 30 years of marriage and partnership. Elena held her breath, waiting for their verdict. Finally, her father spoke. Elena, your mother and I need time to discuss this. Of course, Elena said, gathering up the contract and her laptop. But Dad, I need you to know that I'm going to accept Adrian's offer whether you support me or not. I would rather have your blessing, but I won't let fear make this decision for me. Her father's expression was unreadable. And if we can't support this decision? Elena felt tears threaten, but kept her voice steady. Then I'll hope that someday you'll forgive me for choosing my own happiness over your plans for me. Her mother stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where Elena had played as a child. Elena, do you love him, this Adrian? The question surprised Elena. I don't know. I care about him, and I respect him, and he makes me feel like I can accomplish anything. But this decision isn't about love. It's about choosing the life I want to live, and if love comes later? Elena thought about Adrian's smile, about the way he listened when she talked about her work, about how safe and understood she felt in his presence. If love comes later, I'll be grateful. But even if it doesn't, I'll still have built something meaningful with my life. Her mother turned back from the window. Your grandmother made choices based on duty and family obligation. I made choices based on love and partnership with your father. Maybe it's time for you to make choices based on your own dreams. Elena stared at her mother, hardly daring to hope that this meant what she thought it meant. Her father rubbed his temples. Elena, if we agree to support this, what happens with the Castellanos family? Ricardo and I will handle that together, Elena said. We're going to tell both families that we realize we're not right for each other, that we want to remain friends but not get married. And they'll accept that? They'll have to, Elena said with more confidence than she felt. Ricardo has his own reasons for wanting to end the engagement. Her father was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he looked up at Elena with an expression she couldn't read. Show me that contract again, he said. If my daughter is going to bet her future on a business deal, I want to make sure it's a good one. Elena handed over the contract, hope blooming in her chest like spring flowers after a long winter. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in Adrian's temporary Seattle office, looking out at the 50 acres of empty land that would become her first major project. The Pacific Northwest rain drummed against the windows, and the overcast sky made everything look gray and uncertain. But Elena had never felt more excited about uncertainty in her life. Her parents had surprised her. After 3 days of heated family discussions, countless phone calls with financial advisors, and what Elena suspected were some difficult conversations with the Castellanos family, they had given her their blessing. More than that, they had insisted on flying to Seattle to meet Adrian and tour the project site before she signed anything. "This is really happening," Elena said to Adrian, who was standing beside her with architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. "Having second thoughts?" Adrian asked, but his tone was gentle, not worried. "No," Elena said immediately. "I'm having first thoughts. Real thoughts about what I want to build here, what this community could become." Over the past 2 weeks, Elena had thrown herself into research about the Seattle housing market, the demographics of families who would live in the development, and the environmental challenges of building sustainably in the Pacific Northwest. Climate. She had filled 3 notebooks with ideas and stayed up until dawn sketching preliminary designs. "Show me what you're thinking," Adrian said, moving closer to look over her shoulder at the plans she had been working on. Elena spread out her latest sketches, her excitement bubbling over as she began to explain. "I want to cluster the houses around shared green spaces instead of lining them up in rows. Each cluster would have 8 to 10 homes with different configurations, single-family houses for families with children, smaller units for elderly residents, and duplexes for young professionals." Adrian studied the drawings, asking questions that showed he understood both the design vision and the practical implications. "The shared green spaces are brilliant. It gives every family access to yard space, even if their individual lot is small." "Exactly. And look at this," Elena pointed to another section of her design. "I want to put the community building at the center, with a library, a childcare center, and space for small businesses. Imagine if residents could walk to get their haircut or buy groceries without having to drive across town. It's like designing a small town instead of just a housing development," Adrian said, and Elena could hear the excitement in his voice. "That's exactly what it is. Most affordable housing isolates people from the broader community. I want to create a place that becomes part of the community, that adds value to the whole neighborhood instead of being seen as something to tolerate." Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her designs with an intensity that made Elena nervous. Finally, he looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Elena, these designs are extraordinary, but I need to be honest with you about something." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "This level of innovation, the integrated community features, the sustainable materials you're proposing, it's going to be more expensive than a traditional development. The city is expecting affordable housing, not luxury housing." Elena felt her excitement deflate. "Are you saying it's not possible?" "I'm saying it's not going to be easy. We'll need to be creative about funding, about finding cost savings in some areas so we can invest in others. We'll need to prove to the city that spending more upfront will save money in the long term through reduced infrastructure costs and higher property values." Elena looked at her drawings, seeing all the ways they could be simplified, all the features that could be cut to reduce costs. "What if we compromise? Keep the clustered housing layout but simplify the community building." "Elena," Adrian said, stepping closer to her, "I didn't hire you to compromise. I hired you to innovate. If this was easy, anyone could do it. The reason it's going to work is because you're thinking about problems that other developers ignore." Elena felt a flutter of hope. "So you think it's possible?" "I think it's going to require us to work harder and smarter than we've ever worked before. I think it's going to mean long days and difficult conversations with city planners and contractors who think we're crazy. But yes, I think it's possible." Elena looked out at the empty land again, but now, instead of seeing uncertainty, she saw potential. She could imagine children playing in the shared gardens, elderly residents sitting on community porches, young professionals walking to work from their sustainable, affordable homes. Adrian, I need to tell you something, Elena said, turning away from the window to face him. What? When I agreed to this project, I told myself it was purely professional. I was doing it for my career, for the opportunity to prove myself as an architect. Adrian's expression grew guarded. And now? Now, I realize that working with you, building something meaningful together, it matters to me in ways that go beyond professional. I care about you. I care about what we're creating together. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Elena worried she had crossed a line they had both been carefully avoiding. Elena, he said finally, I need you to know that my offer was genuine. Regardless of anything personal between us, this opportunity exists because you're talented, not because I'm attracted to you. I know that, Elena said quickly. And I would never want you to think I accepted because of personal feelings instead of professional merit. But, Elena took a deep breath, but I also need you to know that over these past few weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you think about communities and people and responsibility, I've started to hope that maybe this partnership could become something more than just business. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Elena could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Elena, I've been hoping the same thing. But I wanted to wait until after you were settled here, until you felt secure in your professional role, before I told you how I feel. And how do you feel? Elena asked, her heart racing. I feel like meeting you was the best accident that ever happened to me. I feel like watching you work, seeing the passion you bring to creating spaces where people can thrive, has made me remember why I wanted to be a developer in the first place. I feel like I'm falling in love with someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears. Adrian, I was so scared that taking this job meant choosing between my career and my personal life. It doesn't, Adrian said, reaching up to cup her face gently. Elena, I want to build a life with you that honors both who you are professionally and who you are personally. I want us to be partners in every sense of the word. Elena looked around the temporary office, at the plans spread across the table, at the empty land visible through the rain-streaked windows. 6 months ago, she had been trapped in a life that felt predetermined, suffocated by other people's expectations. Now she was standing in a city she had never lived in, about to build something that had never been built before, with a man who saw her exactly as she was and loved her for it. I want that too, Elena said, and Adrian's smile was like sunshine, breaking through the Seattle clouds. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now we get to work, Adrian said, gesturing to the plans. We have 18 months to design and build something that will change how people think about affordable housing. We have a community to create and families to serve. And personally? Adrian laughed, pulling her closer. Personally, we take it one day at a time. We build trust the same way we build communities, carefully, thoughtfully, with attention to details that matter. Elena stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting possibility and promise and the future they were about to create together. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the empty land that would soon become home to hundreds of families. But inside the temporary office, Elena felt like she had finally found her way home to herself. Are you ready for this? Adrian asked against her lips. Elena looked at the man who had offered her a better deal than she had ever thought to ask. For, at the project that would define her career, at the life she had chosen instead of the one that had been chosen for her. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, she said, and meant every word. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in Adrian's temporary Seattle office, looking out at the 50 acres of empty land that would become her first major project. The Pacific Northwest rain drummed against the windows, and the overcast sky made everything look gray and uncertain. But Elena had never felt more excited about uncertainty in her life. Her parents had surprised her. After 3 days of heated family discussions, countless phone calls with financial advisors, and what Elena suspected were some difficult conversations with the Castellanos family, They had given her their blessing. More than that, they had insisted on flying to Seattle to meet Adrian and tour the project site before she signed anything. "This is really happening," Elena said to Adrian, who was standing beside her with architectural plans spread across a makeshift table. "Having second thoughts?" Adrian asked, but his tone was gentle, not worried. "No," Elena said immediately. "I'm having first thoughts. Real thoughts about what I want to build here, what this community could become." Over the past 2 weeks, Elena had thrown herself into research about the Seattle housing market, the demographics of families who would live in the development, and the environmental challenges of building sustainably in the Pacific Northwest. Climate. She had filled 3 notebooks with ideas and stayed up until dawn sketching preliminary designs. "Show me what you're thinking," Adrian said, moving closer to look over her shoulder at the plans she had been working on. Elena spread out her latest sketches, her excitement bubbling over as she began to explain. "I want to cluster the houses around shared green spaces instead of lining them up in rows. Each cluster would have 8 to 10 homes with different configurations: single-family houses for families with children, smaller units for elderly residents, and duplexes for young professionals." Adrian studied the drawings, asking questions that showed he understood both the design vision and the practical implications. "The shared green spaces are brilliant. It gives every family access to yard space, even if their individual lot is small." "Exactly. And look at this," Elena pointed to another section of her design. "I want to put the community building at the center, with a library, a childcare center, and space for small businesses. Imagine if residents could walk to get their haircut or buy groceries without having to drive across town. It's like designing a small town instead of just a housing development," Adrian said, and Elena could hear the excitement in his voice. "That's exactly what it is. Most affordable housing isolates people from the broader community. I want to create a place that becomes part of the community, that adds value to the whole neighborhood instead of being seen as something to tolerate." Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her designs with an intensity that made Elena nervous. Finally, he looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Elena, these designs are extraordinary, but I need to be honest with you about something." Elena's stomach dropped. "What?" "This level of innovation, the integrated community features, the sustainable materials you're proposing, it's going to be more expensive than a traditional development. The city is expecting affordable housing, not luxury housing." Elena felt her excitement deflate. "Are you saying it's not possible?" "I'm saying it's not going to be easy. We'll need to be creative about funding, about finding cost savings in some areas so we can invest in others. We'll need to prove to the city that spending more upfront will save money in the long term through reduced infrastructure costs and higher property values." Elena looked at her drawings, seeing all the ways they could be simplified, all the features that could be cut to reduce costs. "What if we compromise? Keep the clustered housing layout, but simplify the community building?" "Elena," Adrian said, stepping closer to her, "I didn't hire you to compromise. I hired you to innovate. If this was easy, anyone could do it. The reason it's going to work is because you're thinking about problems that other developers ignore." Elena felt a flutter of hope. "So you think it's possible?" "I think it's going to require us to work harder and smarter than we've ever worked before. I think it's going to mean long days and difficult conversations with city planners and contractors who think we're crazy. But yes, I think it's possible." Elena looked out at the empty land again, but now, instead of seeing uncertainty, she saw potential. She could imagine children playing in the shared gardens, elderly residents sitting on community porches, young professionals walking to work from their sustainable, affordable homes. "Adrian, I need to tell you something," Elena said, turning away from the window to face him. "What?" "When I agreed to this project, I told myself it was purely professional. I was doing it for my career, for the opportunity to prove myself as an architect." Adrian's expression grew guarded. "And now?" "Now, I realize that working with you, building something meaningful together, it matters to me in ways that go beyond professional." I care about you. I care about what we're creating together. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and Elena worried she had crossed a line they had both been carefully avoiding. Elena, he said finally, I need you to know that my offer was genuine. Regardless of anything personal between us, this opportunity exists because you're talented, not because I'm attracted to you. I know that, Elena said quickly. And I would never want you to think I accepted because of personal feelings instead of professional merit. But, Elena took a deep breath, but I also need you to know that over these past few weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you think about communities and people and responsibility, I've started to hope that maybe this partnership could become something more than just business. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that Elena could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Elena, I've been hoping the same thing. But I wanted to wait until after you were settled here, until you felt secure in your professional role, before I told you how I feel. And how do you feel? Elena asked, her heart racing. I feel like meeting you was the best accident that ever happened to me. I feel like watching you work, seeing the passion you bring to creating spaces where people can thrive, has made me remember why I wanted to be a developer in the first place. I feel like I'm falling in love with someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears. Adrian, I was so scared that taking this job meant choosing between my career and my personal life. It doesn't, Adrian said, reaching up to cup her face gently. Elena, I want to build a life with you that honors both who you are professionally and who you are personally. I want us to be partners in every sense of the word. Elena looked around the temporary office, at the plans spread across the table, at the empty land visible through the rain-streaked windows. 6 months ago, she had been trapped in a life that felt predetermined, suffocated by other people's expectations. Now she was standing in a city she had never lived in, about to build something that had never been built before, with a man who saw her exactly as she was and loved her for it. I want that too, Elena said, and Adrian's smile was like sunshine, breaking through the Seattle clouds. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now we get to work, Adrian said, gesturing to the plans. We have 18 months to design and build something that will change how people think about affordable housing. We have a community to create and families to serve. And personally? Adrian laughed, pulling her closer. Personally, we take it one day at a time. We build trust the same way we build communities, carefully, thoughtfully, with attention to details that matter. Elena stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting possibility and promise and the future they were about to create together. Outside, the rain continued to fall on the empty land that would soon become home to hundreds of families. But inside the temporary office, Elena felt like she had finally found her way home to herself. Are you ready for this? Adrian asked against her lips. Elena looked at the man who had offered her a better deal than she had ever thought to ask. For, at the project that would define her career, at the life she had chosen instead of the one that had been chosen for her. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, she said, and meant every word. 2 years later, Elena stood at the entrance to Harmony Commons, the community she had designed from empty land and impossible dreams. Children's laughter echoed from the playground she had positioned at the heart of the development, visible from every cluster of homes so parents could watch their kids play while tending community gardens or chatting with neighbors. On shared porches, the morning sun filtered through the solar panels she had integrated so seamlessly into the roof designs that visitors often didn't notice them until someone pointed out how the homes generated their own electricity. Mrs. Rodriguez was hanging laundry on the line outside her duplex, while her elderly mother sat in the shade reading to Mrs. Rodriguez's 3-year-old son. Across the green space, Mr. Thompson was teaching a group of teenagers how to maintain the community vegetable garden. This was what Elena had envisioned in those early sketches, not just affordable housing, but affordable community. The documentary. Crew wants to interview you at 3, Adrian said, walking up behind her with 2 cups of coffee and a tablet full of messages. And the mayor's office called. They want to discuss replicating the Harmony Commons model in 3 other neighborhoods. Elena accepted the coffee gratefully. Even after 2 years, she sometimes couldn't believe this was her real life. Did you? See the article in Architectural Digest? The one that called you a visionary architect who proves that affordable doesn't have to mean uninspiring? Adrian grinned. I may have read it several times. Elena laughed. The national attention had been overwhelming but gratifying. Architecture schools were adding case studies of Harmony Commons to their curriculum. Other developers were calling Elena's firm to discuss similar projects. The waiting list for housing in the development was over a year long, but the real measure of success was simpler. The families who lived here were happy. Elena! Adrian! Mrs. Kim waved from her front porch where she was setting up for the weekly community potluck. Are you joining us tonight? Wouldn't miss it, Elena called back. These potlucks had become the heartbeat of Harmony Commons. Started organically by residents who wanted to get to know their neighbors. Elena and Adrian tried to attend whenever they were in town. Speaking of tonight, Adrian said, his voice taking on a tone Elena had learned to recognize when he was nervous about something. I have something I want to ask you. Elena looked at him more closely. Adrian was wearing his best suit, which was unusual for a casual site visit. His hair was perfectly styled instead of charmingly rumpled. And unless she was mistaken, there was a small jewelry box bulge in his jacket pocket. Adrian, Elena said, her heart starting to race. What's going on? Instead of answering, Adrian took her hand and led her to the community center, the building. That had been the most challenging part of the design, but had become the soul of Harmony Commons. Inside, the main room was set up for the after-school program, with children's artwork covering the walls and small tables arranged for homework help. Do you remember the first time you showed me your plans for this place? Adrian asked, stopping in the center of the room. In your temporary office during that rainstorm, Elena said. I was so nervous you would think my ideas were too ambitious. I thought they were perfect, Adrian said. But more than that, I thought you were perfect. Watching you talk about creating community, seeing how much you cared about the families who would live here, I knew I was falling in love with someone extraordinary. Elena felt tears starting to build. Adrian. Elena, these past 2 years have been the best of my life. Not just because Harmony Commons exceeded every expectation, but because I got to build it with you. I've loved watching you become the architect you always dreamed of being. I've loved being your partner in work and in life. Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena's hands flew to her mouth as he dropped to one knee in the room where dozens of children learned and played every day, surrounded by the evidence of the community they had created together. Elena Martinez, Adrian said, opening the box, to reveal a ring that was simple and elegant and perfect. Will you marry me? Not because anyone arranged it, not because it makes business sense, but because I love you and I want to build the rest of our life together. Elena looked down at Adrian's hopeful face, then around the community center they had designed together, then out the windows at the thriving neighborhood that had grown from their shared vision. 2 years ago, she had been trapped in a life that felt predetermined. Now she was free to choose her own future, and that future looked like partnership with the man who had seen her potential before she had fully seen it herself. Yes, Elena said, laughing as tears streamed down her face. Yes, absolutely yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and spun her around in the middle of the room. Through the windows, Elena could see Mrs. Kim hanging streamers. For the potluck, Mr. Thompson watering his tomatoes, and Mrs. Rodriguez's son chasing butterflies through the shared garden. I have a confession, Elena said as Adrian set her down. What? I've been hoping you would ask. I've been carrying around ideas for our wedding in my sketchbook for months, Adrian laughed. Of course you have. What does an architect's wedding look like? Elena pulled out her phone and showed him the sketches she had been secretly working on. Outdoor ceremony in the community garden, reception in the common area, local food from the businesses we helped establish in the neighborhood, a celebration. That includes the whole community we built together. Elena, Adrian said, looking at her designs, These are beautiful. But are you sure you want to get married here instead of somewhere more traditional? Elena looked around the community center, at the children's artwork on the walls, at the evidence of lives being lived well in the space she had designed. Adrian, 3 years ago my family tried to arrange a marriage for me in the name of tradition. I don't want a traditional wedding. I want a wedding that reflects who we actually are. And who are we? Elena considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. We're people who believe that good design can change lives. We're partners who make each other better. We're builders who create spaces where communities can flourish. And we're ridiculously lucky, Adrian added, pulling her close. Why? Because we found each other. Because you were brave enough to choose your own path. Because that path led you to me. Elena kissed him in the community center they had designed together, surrounded by the evidence of dreams made real. Outside, life continued in the neighborhood they had built. Children playing, neighbors talking, families thriving in homes that honored both their need for affordability and their desire for beauty. 6 months later, Elena and Adrian were married. In the community garden on a warm Saturday afternoon, surrounded by the residents of Harmony Commons and both of their families. Elena's parents, who had traveled from across the country, spent the reception talking enthusiastically with city planners about expanding the Harmony Commons model. Ricardo, who had married Isabel the previous spring, gave a toast about the courage to choose love over convenience. Elena's grandmother, now 85 and still sharp as a tack, pulled Elena aside during the dancing. Mia, she said, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Thank you, Abuela. When I was your age, women didn't have the choices you had. We married for family, for security, for duty. But you chose to marry for love and partnership and shared dreams. Elena felt tears threaten. Do you think I made the right choice? Her grandmother looked around at the celebration happening in the community Elena had designed. At the thriving neighborhood that proved affordable housing could be beautiful and sustainable. At Adrian, who was dancing with Mrs. Rodriguez's son while the boy's mother took pictures. Mia, her grandmother said, you didn't just make the right choice. You made a choice that will inspire other young women to believe they can choose their own futures too. As the evening wound down and the residents of Harmony Commons began cleaning up from the reception they had insisted on hosting, Elena and Adrian walked hand in hand through the neighborhood they had built together. Solar lights illuminated. The pathways, children's bikes were scattered on front porches, and the sound of families settling in for the night created a symphony of contentment. Any regrets? Adrian asked as they paused in front of the community center where he had proposed. Elena thought about the question seriously. I regret that it took me so long to believe I deserved to choose my own happiness. I regret the stress I put my family through when I broke the engagement. I regret that Ricardo and I wasted so much time pretending to be compatible instead of just being honest with each other. But no regrets about saying yes when a stranger offered you a better deal than the one life had given you? Elena looked at her husband, at the community they had created, at the life they were building together, one sustainable, affordable, beautiful project at a time. No regrets about that, she said. Best decision I ever made. Adrian kissed her. Under the solar-powered streetlights in the neighborhood where families were falling asleep in homes designed with love and intention, where community flourished in spaces created for connection, where dreams had become foundation for dozens of families to build their own futures. What's next? Adrian asked.